welcome everybody. Welcome to this session. It's our second session of the day. And we have our beautiful and wonderful Laura G. Holland with us. It's always a pleasure to have her here with us. She's a teacher. She has experience teaching and also training teachers and supervising and just making us feel better. If you were here in her session yesterday, then you know what a wonderful job she does. So we have a lot to learn from her, and she's going to be talking about questions and questioning, classroom practice, optimal discussions, and critical thinking. So this is the best time of the day to do so. I think we're all awake now after a cup of coffee and ready for lunch after this session. So Laura, welcome to the stage, and this is all yours.
So here's cheers to everybody with your tea or coffee if you have it, if you want it. And hello, thank you for coming. As you can see, we were already starting out with all kinds of questions. I'm so curious all the time about who I'm working with and everything. And our students, the same thing. Every student in my class is an opportunity to learn about their world, the world, and so much else. So hello, greetings, welcome everybody. I'm so happy to see you. Thank you, Dee, for that lovely introduction. And yes, we're going to talk today, only a snippet because it's so huge, but we're going to talk about questions and questioning. And I'll share some ideas about classroom practice, how we can form some optimal discussions, like really good discussions. I used to be terrible at getting them going, and I've really dedicated myself to learning how to run good discussions, and now it's one of my favorite things as a teacher. And also, how can we promote more critical thinking? So let's go. All right. So the introduction and rationale for all of this, because in our classes, we really need to give our rationales for ourselves, but also share them with your students, right? Every introduction, every time I give instructions or directions about something, I tell them why I'm asking them to do it. And it goes a really long way for suspending their disbelief or their resistance, right? A lot of times they'll say, oh, okay, I'll give it a try. Sure, let's see how this goes. And then they like it, right? Because it's fun. So I try to make it fun. I think language learning should be really, really fun. We have a great opportunity. So anyway, we are teachers and we ask a lot of questions all the time, all day long, right? Question, 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 question. We're constantly firing questions at our students all the time. And there are different ways that we approach questions and questioning in the classrooms with our students and also with ourselves. So in the next 60 minutes or so, we're going to explore some together, and then I hope you will come away and think about some of these practices in a new way, and then we'll also have time for conversation, for a question and answer. So first, let's talk about a tool that I think pretty much everybody in here knows about now, ThinkPairShare, a really, really, really important tool. Now, a little story. I actually thought that I invented ThinkPairShare. And I kind of did in a way. I've been teaching for such a long time. And one of the things I started noticing as I was getting more experience was that it was very common in the program I was teaching in for the teachers, for the professors, to just pose a question to the students and then, but not call on anybody individually, just wait for the volunteers. And then it's usually the same 4 or 5 students whose hands shoot up, right? And so it gives us kind of the false impression that everybody's participating, right? Because we're hearing voices, there's no silence, as Mary and Kiara were just talking about. It makes us feel like they're doing it. But what's actually happening that way? Well, when the same 4 or 5 students are the ones who are answering all the time or just calling it out. Number one, we can't really hear what everybody's saying. We can't really hear if there's a wrong answer also being called out. And there are always going to be students in our classes who, no matter what, will never, ever shout out an answer. For either cultural reasons or their personalities, they will not shout out an answer, and they will only respond when they are called on. So the other issue about Think, Pair, Share, that why I thought I invented it, I started thinking this myself, is that I myself am a slow learner, a very slow learner. I do a few things fast. I eat fast, I talk fast, I walk really fast, but I don't learn fast. And so that gives me huge empathy for my students who also need 3 more seconds, please, to think, right? So I started thinking of this idea of like, what if I built in time to think first, and then have them talking with each other so that they can kind of check with each other before they go public and share their answers with everybody. And so I thought, oh man, Teacher Laura, you are brilliant. This is awesome. Well, then I started getting to be a more experienced teacher and doing more research and going to conferences and workshops. And I started hearing Think, Pair, Share, Think, Pair, Share, Think, Pair, Square, Share. And I was like, that sounds exactly like what I'm doing. So I started doing even more research and found Frank Lyman, 1981, from the University of Maryland, is the person who came up with this back when communicative language teaching was still a crying new baby, right? And we weren't sure about communicative language teaching yet at that point, because everybody was still in the methods ideas. So I started thinking, oh, I'm sorry, I need to close my email here. It's dinging, dinging, dinging. All right, now I'm back. All right, thank you for your patience. And so, Think, Pair, Share. So with Frank Lyman, the idea is you think. And what is that good for? It's good for learners who need a moment to think. And that is pretty much everybody in our class, right? There are only going to be a few each time who we know we have these students, right, who have this ability to hear the question, process it, translate it, come up with the answer, and spit it out of their mouths in 1 second. But the majority of our students are not that way. So we need to remember them and make a lot of opportunities for them to think, have a second, just calm down, use our teacher silence like Kiara and Mary were talking about, and then talk with each other, which is really good. Give students the chance to test out their answers before going public, and then we can all share our answers together, and we can call on pairs. And what's really lovely about this is that if a student had the wrong answer the first time, so what? They can answer with the right one now because their partner convinced them of what. It's like, oh yeah, you're right. That's a better answer. So then they don't have to be embarrassed because they've had some time to think, process, reflect, change. And all of this takes maybe 10 seconds. It's a really good time investment. It does take longer to do things this way using Think, Pair, Share. But I will say it's an absolutely worthwhile time investment, and we absolutely want to use it. I incorporate Think, Pair, Share multiple times a day in my face-to-face classes. Now, what did I do with Think, Pair, Share online once we moved to Zoom classes? So I do 2 things. One, maybe I just take out the pair part and I do Think, Share, but I still give them time to think. Okay, and then they can either put their answers in the chat or unmute themselves, or if it's a really small class, they're already unmuted. And then it works out really, really beautifully. And then we share the answers together. The other thing that I can do online is if I really want them to get into having a discussion about a particular question, I teach a lot of speaking, listening classes. So then the pair part might be, I put them into pairs and I send them off to breakout rooms. But I say, okay, you have 2 minutes for this, or you have 1 minute for this. So that's a trick. A lot of times, a tip I'm giving you, give just barely the amount of time that they need to finish whatever the discussion task is, or whatever the task is, because it will keep your pacing going. It will keep things moving along. And then if they genuinely need more time, you can say, okay, and I often have my students say, no, wait, teacher, we need more time. We need 2 more minutes, just, that's okay. And that's awesome because they are then managing and getting a feel for their own timing, their own learning processes, and they're taking responsibility and student agency, which of course, that is what we are after. So Think, Pair, Share may seem like one small tool that maybe I'll use it here and there. For me, it is a fundamental aspect of every single class that I teach, whether it's language teaching, teacher training, any workshop, everything. Whoops. Uh-oh, it froze up again. Hold on. This happened yesterday too. All right, I'm gonna have to reload my slides. That's what happened yesterday too. Okay. And what's the next slide? Oh my gosh. Let's try it. And moment of truth. Ta-da! All right. Why is Think, Pair, Share important for our teaching? Okay, well, I kind of went into this already, but the key takeaway for me is that every student has the chance to think and produce for every single question that we pose this way. So that is really critically important, because a lot of times for our students, the learning kind of stays up in here, kind of gray, not for sure. We think we know it, but until we actually have to produce by speaking or writing or some other method, we don't really know what has been learned, right? So that production is actually critically important. And it's a wonderful thinking routine, okay? Harvard University has a beautiful website about thinking routines that I just learned about in about a year or so ago. And I highly recommend it. I don't have it listed here, but just if you go to your search engine and type Harvard University thinking routines, you'll come to some really fabulous resources. All right. So now a little think, share, action time here. Now it's your turn to answer some stuff. So I'm going to give you a few seconds to think. Oh, thank you so much, Dee. You're a rock star. Think for a minute and then answer in the chat. Or if you're in the session here, you can also call out some answers. This is going to have more than one answer. And the question is, who? Who do we learn our first languages from? I try to give them more time, Eddie, if I can, yeah. It depends on what the task is. I might say, don't worry about it, or just do as much as you can finish, and you can finish later, okay? Leticia says, our family and the people around us. More specifically, let's break down that family. Parents and siblings, right, Ellie? Yeah, good. Our parents, brothers, sisters, who else? More. More than family, more than parents, who else? There are lots more people who we learn our first languages from. Yeah, teachers, right, exactly. TV, okay, absolutely. I come from a very large family, and my youngest brother, his first word was mama. His second word was Batman. Why? Because we would come home from school and we'd all run to watch Batman, and he was the baby sitting with us, and we're taking care of him after school. So, yep. TV and media, absolutely, for sure. Anybody, our community, yeah, Julie, exactly. From everybody around us, and also media, exactly. And so that's exactly right. We learn from multiple sources, and it's a great system, right? It's a really good system. We nearly all learn to speak our native languages, our first languages, right? But then what happens? We get into classrooms, and suddenly there are textbooks and tests and objectives and students sitting in rows, and students sitting. Languages are not learned sitting on our backsides, okay? And we have all these different things, and so then the walls of resistance really, really go up. So on the first day of teaching, I pose this question to every single class I ever teach, whether it's a language class or a teacher training class. We always, I ask this question of every single student. They could be novice, they could be advanced learners, they could be kids, they could be adults. I ask this of everybody. And then after they've answered all the questions of my mother, the fathers, our mothers, our fathers, our aunts, our uncles, our grandmothers, our siblings, cousins, neighbors, the media, teachers, all those answers, then I say, right, exactly, 100% correct. Woo! Okay, but your mothers and your fathers, and they're not here, right? But we need to learn language. Languages are learned in communities. So we are going to be the mothers and the fathers and the aunts and the uncles and the friends and the sisters and the cousins and the brothers and the teachers, and I will bring the media and you will bring the media, and we are going to have a really good time, and we are all going to help each other. And I spend my whole first day, I don't take out the syllabus. I don't show them anything about the syllabus. I send that home with them for homework to read on their own time. I spend the entire first day building my language learning community, because languages are learned in communities, okay? And we need that resource to create a community. And so I have them getting up. I have a whole presentation about building language communities. That's a different presentation. But this is very critically important as well. Then I go home, they read the course syllabus and the course expectations and the rules at home. Then the next day we come back, we talk about it, we create some co-class rules. So these are all, and I ask them, a question I ask them is, what do you think is a rule we should have in this classroom? And they always bring up respect and safety, because so many of our students have come from classrooms where they've had very, very bad experiences, either from the other students or sometimes even from the teachers. Hello, good afternoon if you're just joining us. All right, here's another kind of question, other questions that we can ask. And we can ask questions to check in. Now, this became really important during the pandemic, right? So how are you doing, right? You know, it used to be when they'd come into class, I'm like, hey, how you doing? But now, after the pandemic, I mean, I have a lot of students whose parents died or who were affected horribly, and everybody's mental health really suffered quite a bit during lockdown, the initial stages and the initial months. And we as teachers had 2 weeks to figure out how to do all this online. I know that's the same all over the globe. So how are you doing ceased to be a small talk question after this 1.5 years of pandemic. So I started changing that a little bit, and I would do polls or chat or just asking them and just say, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you today? Okay, and my students really responded to that. They told me that they really appreciated me asking them that question and them being able to say, and people would say anything from I'm a 2 to I'm an 11, okay? But that really helped everybody to see where we were at, and then to know that we need to be extra gentle and caring for our students who are having a 2 or a 3 kind of a day. Another question, this is one of the favorites my students have loved, even before the pandemic, but they really love it now. How do you relieve stress? Or, are you doing okay? So go ahead now and write in the chat or unmute yourself. What are some questions either that you might use now to check in with your students, or that you have used already? Go ahead and put them in the chat. What are some examples that we can share?
Remember, you can participate through the chat, and also you can participate joining us here on the session if you want to join us with video, and then you can also use your microphones when we have question times like this.
Okay, I'm going to give you a minute. You can keep on typing. I'm just going to move on, but please go ahead if you have one, or that you think of one that you would like to use. Go ahead and put it in the chat. Jesslyn says, hello guys, is everything okay? Or Elena says, I usually ask, how are you? Yeah, the scale is really, they like the scale. Somehow that resonates with the students. How's your family? Yeah, good. We have to be a little careful with that one, because if somebody's family died, it's really painful. And I made that mistake. I learned that one the hard way. Very, very tricky. What's something good that happened to you today? Or maybe 2 things. I love that one. These are beautiful. How are things going? Good. All right. These are excellent. Thank you. Now, here are some other kinds of questions that we can ask at the end of the class. Now, I know a lot of you use exit tickets, so these are the kinds of things that we can do. Okay, everybody, please take 3 minutes and write down one thing you have learned today, one thing that's still confusing, and one thing that you feel confident that you could teach someone else from this week's class, that you could come up and you could be the teacher tomorrow, either sitting down privately with somebody or even up at the front of the class. All right, so these are some exit ticket kinds of questions that we can ask. So if you have some exit ticket kinds of questions you ask or that you might think of to ask, you can go ahead and put those in the chat as well. Now, okay, whole new kind of questions that we're going to do. I love this topic of questions and questioning, and so what I did was I came at it from a lot of different ways. So this is actually an adaptation of a very old testing method that we used to do for placement. Several of the schools I've worked in used what was called the John and the Fred tests. And one section of it was this very challenging task, and we used it to help decide what level students were at. So it takes a little bit to get used to. It's very odd. So let me just model it for a moment. I say, ask me, and we're looking at our two guys here, right? Ask me if they are smiling. Are they smiling? Ask me if they are empty-handed. Are they empty-handed? Ask me if they are carrying backpacks. Are they carrying backpacks? Ask me if they are wearing the same color shirts. Are they wearing the same color shirts? Okay, so now I'm going to why don't you do one? Put the create the question. Ask me if they are being quiet. Okay, and go ahead and put that in the chat. Turn that into a question. It's a great way to have students practice asking questions. While you're thinking of that, now the one thing is I would never use this to teach the initial forms because it would be too challenging and it's too hard to kind of get your brain around the process. It's actually a complicated process to do this and requires a certain level of proficiency. So one of the things that is really great is I'll teach the question formation in a normal way or whatever way I'm doing it. But then these I use for pair practice or when we have classroom tutors come in. Sometimes we have classroom tutors who come in and talk with them. And then I'll just have them practicing with each other. Or I just put them in pairs and have them practice with each other that way. Please steal this. It's so awesome. Okay. Now, what's something that you notice about all these questions? This is kind of critically important that when you first start using this procedure, stick with one kind of question first. So these are all going to be questions using be, okay? All of these are questions using be, which is really good because then they don't have to keep changing because that gets really complicated. But then after they've had more practice doing this, maybe around week 3, week 4, and after we've been doing other questions, maybe like with the auxiliary do, for example, then I might say, okay, here we go. I mix it up a little bit more. Ask me if she is young, if she's old. Okay, but now look at this. If she has any children. So now this question is going to require do as the auxiliary. All right, so then you can kind of bump up the level of challenge and not everybody has to do it. You could tell them, if you have a mixed level class, you can tell them just do the ones with be or talk with your partners. You can adapt this. And the thing about PowerPoint is so lovely now. You can grab these pictures from online and PowerPoint allows you to make just beautiful slides. All right, here's another one. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but again, these are now more mixed up. But we can also pick pictures and ask questions that help reinforce vocabulary, grammatical forms, anything, so much. And also we can get to culture. So I showed this picture to a class of mine in which I had quite a few Saudi and Yemeni students in it. And I found this picture right around the time that the Saudi government made it legal for women to drive, and I put it up there. And foolishly, cultural assumption, I thought, she's probably Saudi, okay? And I showed it to my students, and immediately they're like, oh, no. She is not Saudi. This woman is not Saudi. And then I suddenly realized, oh my gosh. And so I asked a question. How do you know? How do you know? Now, I'm not saying as the teacher, how do you know, testing them. I'm asking out of genuine curiosity because now they are the experts. And I'm going to talk about that later too. We want to make our students the experts as often as we can. Why? They will open up and they'll start. It really helps them. Yeah, Aurora, patterns. Exactly. Noticing the patterns. It's fabulous for that. And so then I'm glad you brought that up, because in a way it becomes partly, like, even though it's question formation, it's kind of a critical thinking sort of skill that they need to develop to notice those patterns. All right, and here's another one. Ask me if he's a father, if he has a daughter, is she crying, you know? Okay, so blah, blah, blah. Does she love her daddy? My students loved this picture. Okay, now this one, oh my gosh, this is slightly different. This one was such a surprise to me. I thought, okay, this will be about 10 minutes in my class. It was right before the holidays a couple years ago. And it's just a picture. I have no idea who these people are. It's a picture I found online, but I thought it was really kind of cool. It was very colorful. It was catchy. It was engaging. And when we find pictures that just have all this possibility in it, we give a lot of opportunity for our students. We make room for our students' imaginations. So then I might say, name every action that you see them doing. It's not exactly a question, but it's okay. And then they might say, for example, they're toasting the new year. Or where could they be from? And then I have them say several possibilities. And that's really fascinating. They have all these different ideas about where they could be from. Or I might say, tell as many things as you can about this picture in 1 minute. And everybody gets a turn and says one thing about it. And then we go around the room. And I thought, okay, fine, we did it. And then after we did the circle, I was like, okay, and I went to the next slide to do something else. And they're like, no, teacher, hold on, we got more. They were so engaged that we did this for 25 minutes. Now, then I had to bump my next activity to the next day. That was okay. You might not have that flexibility to do that, but just know that this sort of activity, sweet, the students really loved it. And I've done it a few times and it just keeps working with different groups of students and different levels. And if you have multi-level classes, again, you can just have them, talking, making notes, or just talking about it word by instead of whole sentences, maybe just a couple keywords. That works too. You could put them in, you could tell them to take a screenshot, put them in breakout rooms and have them talk about it that way without you being there. It's really, really fun. So discussion questions. Let's talk about discussion questions now. They come in many, many forms. So we can focus on fluency, for example. So one thing that I do, especially in my speaking listening classes, but actually I do it in pretty much all my classes, all my language classes, I begin almost every day with 10 minutes of fluency discussion, where I put them in groups, either in breakout rooms or in groups around the classroom if we're face-to-face, and I ask them, I give them a question, and 1 or 2 questions or a discussion topic to talk about. And the focus is always on fluency. It's not graded, it's formative, it's just practice. But I can ask specific questions that elicit certain grammatical forms, like if we're doing past tense, what did you do over the weekend? Or tell me one of your favorite memories from when you were a kid. Or if we're talking about family members, tell me about your family. If let's say we've just been working on present perfect, I might say, where's the greatest place you've ever been? So you ask questions that elicit the vocabulary and the grammar and the time markers that you are currently working on. So for example, what did you do over the weekend? Or here's one that they loved. And this came up yesterday too. Are there any silver linings to this strange year of pandemic? Describe them for your group. That became one of my group's most favorite questions. They even asked to talk. We talked at the beginning of the term, and they requested to talk about it again later in the term. And it was interesting because they had found more silver linings to the pandemic. One year I had a whole bunch of lawyers. A couple years ago, I had a whole bunch of lawyers in my class, or law students. So I asked the question, what does justice look like? But then that was so interesting, and we didn't have all lawyers in that class, and I thought other people's responses were really interesting too. So I asked that to other classes. Another great question. Steal it. Please steal it. So go ahead now and write any discussion questions that you have used, something that has been really successful for you, and or something that you just now thought of that you might want to try out. Go ahead, and you can put that in the chat while we move on. We'll take a peek at some of those. Now, discussion questions for critical thinking. It is so important for us to go beyond comprehension questions. Nothing wrong with them exactly, but if comprehension questions is the level that we stay at, we will never be introducing or taking advantage of the opportunity to develop critical thinking skills. Why? Because the dynamic of comprehension questions so often is just take in some information and spit it back out again, right? And what we want is for them to be processing and engaging with the questions and engaging their mind and pushing their brains to new levels of thinking. So comprehension questions are fine. I'm not saying don't use them. Sometimes they're great because you only need to check comprehension real fast before you move on. But just remember, they do not ever promote critical thinking skills. So what we can do is we can try asking questions that assume comprehension, but ask the students to do some further tasks, such as write a new ending to this story. Or with your partner, write 3 great discussion questions for the other groups about community service. I have my students have to write discussion questions for each other every single day. And create a dinner party with any of the characters that we've read about this term. Why are you including them? Okay, that was a really fun one when I was teaching a reading class. They went to town on this. They had the coolest, they mixed up all these different people from all the different readings and then explained why they were putting them together. It was fabulous. I thought it would be fun, but I was kind of like, wow, they absolutely blew my mind with how creative they got with it. I forgot to say too, one more thing about starting my day with 10 minutes of discussion. Now, you may not have that flexibility in your schedule, but here's something to keep in mind, and an argument you can even make to your administration if your supervisor is giving you a hard time about this, is I have asked my students, ever since I started doing this quite a few years ago, 10 minutes of fluency conversation to start the class, especially a speaking listening class. And when I ask, I say, is this something that we should keep doing? And I ask them multi-modalities. I ask them if they would, should we do this every day? Is this worth your time as a student? Should we do this every day, or should we not do this every day? Is this a practice that you appreciate, having this chance and opportunity to just discuss with each other to warm up for the warm-up discussion? And 100% of my students, 100% of the time say, yes, we don't understand why more teachers aren't giving us a chance to talk. How in the world are we supposed to learn how to talk if you don't give us a chance to talk? And it's like, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? So my instincts were right, and my experience is on, and I will keep asking them. You know, I ask, and they have to answer me in like 3 or 4 different ways throughout the term. They have to write it, they have to speak it, they have to make a video about it, and I think there's one other way I forgot that I asked them. I asked them in lots of different modalities just to make sure they're being honest with me, and they are. And my students are usually pretty honest with me. They'll tell me when they don't like something or when they have a suggestion. Oh, this is so fun. This is one of my favorites. Okay, so asking questions we don't know the answer to. Okay, teachers, we need to put ourselves in the other position sometimes, right? It's an opportunity for the students to teach and to share with us, and for us to model being good listeners, right? And so again, this kind of harks back to what Mary and Kiara were talking about in the silence, talking about silence. When we as teachers shut up sometimes, when we just stop talking, we create more space for our students. So this one was a super fun one. You can't really see the feather here because it's blocked by my words, but this question was another one of these ones I thought would be, I was like, ooh, this will probably be like 2-minute question, 2-3 minutes. And then I was ready to go with more because I thought they wouldn't take very long on this. They begged for more time. Every time I do this, they beg for more time because they started really explaining why they are a feather or why they are a rock. And then they start asking each other questions, and this really cool conversation ensues. And they walk out. This was one in my term end survey of what were some of your favorite activities that we did. This one comes up quite a bit. They like this. Also, these next two, let's see, Marco says, what 2 things would you do with our education system if you were the president of our country? Elaborate. Yeah, conditional and contrary to the fact. Love it. 100 points for Marco. That's a fabulous example. Also, Aurora says, what should the government do to help people who have lost their jobs affected by the pandemic? Yes. Okay, so these kinds of discussions really inspire our students and make them feel important and make them feel like, okay, English is something important. This is useful for us. And they really get into it. So when we can provide the opportunity for these sorts of questions and making them the experts, meaning we don't have the answer because it's their opinion or their experience, then we know. Then we're on the right track. Okay, more questions we don't know the answer to. These 2 are 2 of my favorites. And I've done these with novice level classes too. What color are you? Or what animal are you? And then in each case, they have to explain their answers. And so I just put them in groups and let them go to town. Okay, a new way to look at all of this, working backward. So rather than asking the question, which is sort of our normal way of being as teachers, we give the answers and have the students write or say or record the questions. So for example, let's do one together. Okay, this is old now. I'm 61. What's a question that can go with this? There's more than one possible answer. This one has kind of limited, we've discovered, but go ahead. No problem, Aurora. I've made so many typos in the chat during this conference. You don't lose any points for that. Okay, anybody have a question for the answer? The answer is I'm 61. What's a question that could go with that? How old are you? How old are you? Yeah, exactly. Okay, so that's the most obvious one. Can anybody think of another one? Ah, there you go, Dee. What's your player number? Awesome. Or actually, this is old now. I'm older than that, even now. When I first started using this slide, the answer to this was I'm 58. And I have to keep changing it. What's your chronological age? Oh, I love that, Marco. Ooh, that is so super cool. Awesome introduction of vocabulary, exactly. Some of my student teachers came up with a couple of other really good examples of, I don't know about where you are, but here in the US, a lot of times if you go to a bakery or a deli, if there's a long line, you have to take a number, right? And so then maybe you're standing in line with people and they're like, hey, I'm 63, what number are you? I'm 61. Okay, that's a possibility. Or I'm coming to pick you up to go to the movies. And I say, you're 63 Main Street? No, I'm 61. Okay, so that's another couple possibilities. Oh, at the bank too, exactly, right, Dee. All right, what's a question for this? This is my 4th time. This one has lots of possibilities, right? Let's see, go ahead, go. Why did you get a discount in your ticket? This is my 4th time. I love it. Any others? Let's see. How many times have you been to blah, 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 right? So this is an awesome way to practice and put into action present perfect. How long have you been in the US? Say. Awesome. Okay. How many times have you fallen in love? I love it. And it's so funny when our students come up with these, because our students come up with these examples too a lot of times. And they start, and then once one person gets funny, then they get into a competition about being funny about it and answering hilarious. Have you been to blah, blah, blah before? Yes. Okay, great. How about this one? I have how many times did you go to the gym this week? This is my 4th time. Woohoo! All right, over the hump. Great one, Carol. Okay, how about the next one? I have 5. How many pets do you have? Do you have dogs? I have 5. Okay, awesome. And look how cool that is, because you can ask it as a WH question, how many, or you can ask it as a yes/no question. I have 2 children, and you? I have 5. Oh, Elena, I love that. I mean, that's a new one for me. I love that. That construction. How many sisters do you have? Exactly. So for me, I was thinking my brothers, because I have 5 brothers, actually. Exactly. Now, how about this? I just gave it away. I have 5, but no sisters. So this is more limited now. Now what's the question? How many matches did you do so far on Tinder? I don't have any children. How about a question? What's a question for I have 5, but no sisters? This one's a little more limited. So this one is kind of cool because it makes them have to narrow, makes them have to be a little more exact. It's not such an open one. How many countries have you visited? Oh, that's for 5 maybe. How many brothers or sisters do you have? Yeah, there we go, Carol. Good. How many siblings do you have? Good, good, good. Exactly. I have 5. I have 5. Or how many brothers or sisters do you have? Yeah, I have 5. And I might even try yeah, there we go, Elena. Have you got a brother? Depending on my level of students, I might accept a wider variety of answers. But if my students are intermediate to advanced, then I'm going to make sure that they say something like, because I have 5, but no sisters. So that but tells me it's contradicting what came in the first clause. So the question has to be, how many brothers do you have? Or because otherwise brothers isn't mentioned. Have you got a brother? Yeah, exactly. Cool, really good. Okay, so now what is something, how many women do you have in your house? Nice. I have 5 women, but none of them are my sisters. I love that, Dee. Okay, so go ahead now and share in the chat an answer that you could put in, and we can let's try that together. Somebody put in an answer, and then we can see about the question. Anybody have one? I know it takes a minute to type. I'm being a bad teacher, not using my teacher wait time. Single. Okay, I'm single. So what's a question for that? Great, Melina, thank you. What's the question? Okay, hang on one second, Julie. That's awesome. What's a question for I'm single? Or I lost him 2 years ago. Oh, wow. Okay, these are great. Single could be, for example, are you married? I'm single. Are you married? There we go. Good. Are you married or single? I'm single. Okay. Oh, Rosalie, I really like the way that you phrase it. Are you married or single? Because then the single word single, her lone word single, makes perfect grammatical sense. It's a short answer. So that is awesome. Now, I lost him 2 years ago. Okay, that one could open up some really heartfelt conversation. They're in Australia. Where are your kids, or where are your parents right now? You know, right? Okay. What's your marital status? Oh, hiring a private tutor. Hiring a private tutor might help. What's the question for that? Then we'll finish with that one. I mean, finish this part with that one. Who has a good question for Marco's answer? I love that. I'm stealing that one. I love that. What's the question? Okay, while people are writing, I'm going to move on to the next slide just because I want to make sure we get through everything. Okay, so now here is a new kind of questions that we as teachers can ask ourselves. And I call this my notes to self. So in my daily lesson planning, oh, okay, I'm going to interrupt. I'm worried about my math test. What do you suggest I do? Getting a private tutor might help. How do you want to learn English? Getting a private tutor might help. Sweet. And look how different those are, right? So when we give the answer, we open up all kinds of possibilities for what the questions could be, but also having our students flip and not always being answering the questions, but creating the questions is really, really important. We do a lot of academic skills preparation because I teach at a university, and we are preparing our students to be able to function with native speakers in small group discussions. So we have a whole program where we teach them to participate and to gain confidence in creating their discussions and discussion questions. And part of that is I have them from the second day of class, I have them starting to learn to write their own discussion questions, even when they are level 1, even level 1 and 2. Okay, so, but when we are planning our daily lesson planning, so I have a checklist because we're humans, right? We teachers are really, we are human. And even with our very best intentions, and we could be the most creative teachers in the world. We could be the best teacher ever. But we are still humans, and our brains work in a certain way. And we're always going to kind of get into certain ruts or patterns and forget to kind of vary those up a little bit. That's why peer observation is so critically important, parenthetically. But we can also ask ourselves these questions. So when I'm making my daily lesson planning checklist, I go through it and I ask myself, is this lesson as active as it can be? Am I making enough opportunities for students to be the experts? Is it well scaffolded, meaning broken into doable steps that set the students up for success? How can I add more student agency? How can I build in teacher silence and make them the experts? Is there enough opportunity for personalization and practice? Does this plan recycle material previously presented? Does this plan promote critical thinking skills? How? I make myself answer that question. And am I making enough opportunities for my learners, for every single learner in my class, even the ones who are trying to be invisible? Am I making enough opportunities for everybody to thrive? Okay, so this is, please steal this. And then also, and this is part of the handout, there's a 2-page, all of these ideas are in the handout, and then there's a second handout that is a checklist. I'll show you on the next slide, just a little preview of it. If you don't already use this or know this, make good friends with Bloom's Revised Taxonomy. There's a chart there with Bloom's Revised Taxonomy verbs and the criteria for supporting critical and higher order thinking tasks for our students. And I check this daily, basically, just to ask myself, to keep myself on track and ask myself, is this as it can be? And then I use the chart to remind myself of what I'm missing in my planning. Yeah, self-reflection as a teacher, Melina, yeah, it's critically important. So here is the, here's just a little preview. It's a whole page, but it's lovely because it's on one page. So it's really easy. Just put it on your desktop, and when you're planning, go through and look and see, are we, okay, asking them to do some remembering and all the choose, define, find, how, label, list, match. I find that looking at these verbs completely gives me ideas of how to structure my activities. Okay, understanding, all the classify, compare, contrast, demonstrate, explain, extend, illustrate, infer, interpret, outline, right? All these things are super critically important and go way beyond comprehension questions. Applying, analyzing, evaluating, creating, okay? So these are the kinds of things we want to be doing with our students, no matter what level they are at. Now, finally, we want to talk about professional development. This is another critically important question. Teachers, to paraphrase an old filmmaker, Woody Allen, we're like sharks, okay? We need to keep on moving or we die, right? We don't want to be those teachers. And if you're here, you aren't that teacher, okay? We know you aren't because you're here on a Sunday trying to get some professional development. So I know that I am speaking to the converted already, but what we can do is ask ourselves, what professional development will serve me best in the coming year, and how can I be a leader? So I ask myself every single year, okay, I have like sort of a time. Every August I kind of do this, every August or very early September. I ask myself, okay, what do I want to learn more about this year? What would be a good idea for me to learn about or how to do? So I think also it's critically important that every year teachers need to try something that they don't know how to do, how to learn how to do something completely new and be a novice, so that we remember what it feels like to be on that side of the desk, right? Because I hear a lot of teachers saying things like, well, I don't understand why they can't, and it's like, when was the last time you tried to learn something absolutely brand new? Okay, try that and then let's have this conversation. All right. So what holes do I have in my training or my education? So for me, I went to a fabulous graduate program in New York City. It was awesome. I got just a wonderful education, but they didn't do a whole lot about teaching pronunciation. And when I got it, when I was in the classroom, then I was kind of like, ooh, this is a hole in my education. So whenever I go to conferences, I make sure I go to many presentations about pronunciation. And now I'm so much more confident about that. And now it's one of my favorite things to teach, pronunciation and stress and intonation. I also go observe teachers I know in my program and elsewhere who I know are experts at this or who are really great at it. So I ask that, I say, can I come and just observe your class and steal some ideas from you? And my program is really gracious. We observe each other all the time, and to do that. And I have people coming in my classes too. What new learning can I take on this year? Again, so that I can learn something new, but also remember what it feels like to be a novice learner. And also here, this is important for all of you because you are here, so you are leaders. How can I help my colleagues or institution or field of EL teaching? What can I do this next year to help promote English language teaching in my region or in my country or globally or in my school or in my classroom? Okay, what kind of new things am I going to learn? So now it's going to be time for questions and takeaways. But what I would love is if you could please write one takeaway that you have from this session. What's one idea that you're going to try it, you're going to use this next week in your classes, and what would you do? And then also we can start taking questions as well. So what's a takeaway? What's something that you really, really want to try out from any of these ideas you heard today?
While you're thinking of your answer, let me remind you, you also have here the post from Rachel where you can just download the handouts for this session.
And in the handouts, you will get descriptions of how to put some of these into place. So what's your takeaway? What are you going to try next week? Asking questions based on a picture. Awesome. Yay. Anybody else?
For me, at least, I know I'm going to integrate that whole, like, giving a set time every class for discussion.
Awesome. Great. And Julie's going to try to ask me. I highly recommend it. It's really fun. It's a little challenging and you have to kind of train them how to do it at first, but it will be it's really worth it and they get it. Alternative questions to how are you doing are really important right now. Yeah, right? Because if our learners aren't feeling emotionally secure, it's going to be a lot harder for them to learn. Melina, you're going to apply all that you can learn. Great. Giving the answer so that they can make the questions so fun. It's so fun. And I did that in a workshop at IPNA, and then several teachers tried it right afterwards because I work with the teachers at IPNA in Chiclayo. And And several of them tried it. So not only did they try it, but I got to watch them doing it with their students and watch whole classrooms having a blast with this. Okay, Aurora's going to try Ask Me. Let's see. If I'm doing my best in order to help my students understand. Yeah, teacher self-questions. Okay, ThinkPairShare. Elena has a question. I have a group of students with whom this practice doesn't work. Really? ThinkShare is okay, but when I ask them to share in pairs, then they keep silent. What do I do? I'd say if it really just doesn't work with this one group of students, bag it. Don't try to force it. Or you can, I might try a few different things, but there's nothing wrong with ThinkShare also. But you could invite them. You could say, you don't want a chance to just try out your answer with one other student? Or maybe make it as a mingle. If you're face-to-face, I don't know if you're face-to-face, but maybe have them stand up and go around. Or if you're online, put them in breakout rooms. But otherwise, just pull out the pair part. It will work with a lot of groups, I think. If it's not working with somebody, then with one particular group, don't force it. Because I think if we don't force it, what you're doing is you're respecting the sort of the feel of that particular class and the learning strategies for that particular class. Somehow the pair part isn't working for them. And so you can kind of play around with the pair part, trying it different ways. But if it really just keeps not working, bag it. And when I say bag it, that's American slang for get rid of it, forget it. Don't do it. Let's see. Mingle. Yeah, Melina, absolutely. Okay, let's see. What am I missing? Oh, Luz, that's so great. I'm so glad you've had such an awesome conference. I know conferences are so exciting. I love conferences. You've tried discussion in breakout rooms. They record their discussions using Vocaroo. Yeah. Or if you're on Zoom, you can record in breakout sessions too. And Vocaroo is a really user-friendly kind of tool. I used to use that a whole lot. Oh, yeah, great, Elena. So just forget it with that particular group. That group, there's something about the dynamic where it's just not working. So I think we really kind of want to work. I think part of respecting who our students are is to understand that, well, this works with this group. This is a disaster with this group. I've had that before too, where I tried this song early on in the pandemic, and it was a Billie Eilish song, and it was really moody and really sad, and my class went nuts for it. It was like the best day we had had. It was amazing. It was about week 4 of a 10-week class. We were meeting 4 or 5 days a week, and it was awesome. So then when I had the class, a new class again in the fall, I thought, okay, well, that was so successful. Let's try it again. And I pulled out the exact same lesson. Total bomb. It was a total bomb. I mean, it wasn't awful, but they just did not respond in the same way. And I think partly it was a different part of the pandemic. Everybody was more used to it, and maybe just a different group of students. So we do kind of have to know, we just have to play with who our students are. So you're very welcome. If it works with other groups, great. Do we have time for more questions? Where are we? Oh, 11:15. Do we have one more question? Yeah, Billy's music is very fashionable. In fact, I was in Peru. The first time I ever heard a Billie Eilish song was in Chiclayo at Café 900. Yeah, she has some great songs, and our students love her work. My son adores her. It's like the one musician who we have completely in common. Yeah, you know, Café 900. It's my hangout when I'm there. All right, any other questions? Last questions? Thank you all. You are an awesome group. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. Oops, wait, there we go. There was my wink, wink, wink. Any questions? Aurora, thank you so much. I love it. I love teaching. I love teachers. I love students. I have been in classrooms since I was a high school student in 1975. And it just gets more exciting every single year. So it's a great job. Thank you all. It was
Thank you, everybody.
give yourselves a big pat on the back for being here on a Sunday and giving you. Have a great one, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. It's been amazing having you here again. And I think we cannot wait for the next year's conference so we can hear some more of the amazing material that you have as well. Thank you all for participating. You made this session fun. You made this session successful. Thank you so much for joining us.